G'day Internet, my name is Di-Mauro Hayes, and well, this is a well-timed video because today I want to be discussing the cricketing fixture. Now, this is a topic that comes up on a semi-regular basis, and it's come up recently off the back of that South African tour announcement, or the squad announcement for that tour of New Zealand. Cricket South Africa was said, oh no, we care very much about Test cricket, but their words certainly say one thing and their actions say something else. So today I thought I would try and resolve this long-standing debate that's been in the scene in cricket for many years now, basically since T20s have really launched off with all those franchise cricket. But before I do that, I do need to do some very brief housekeeping, if you will. I want to discuss my previous video. If you haven't watched that, the link is in the description, and if you just want to skip this rant, go to whatever time along the bottom here is showing up. But that video about the 2008 SCG test match, I was very happy with it. If you haven't watched it, please do check it out in the description below. That video was a pain to make, and it was a pain to publish, because when I published that video, or tried to publish it on the 6th of January, the 16th year anniversary of Michael Clarke's heroics, it told me I couldn't, because I was infringing on copyright grounds. Now, I admit, as I want to do videos about sporting history, that this is something I will have to deal with and I have to be very careful with, even though, interestingly, this wasn't actually a copyright strike. Anyway, I do take a look at it, and it was telling me what I was infringing on was the 2023 Cricket World Cup match between India and Afghanistan. It even tells me what part of the video it was that I was infringing on, so if I wanted to cut it out, I could. That part of the video was the part where the Indian captain, Kapil Dev, received the trophy for winning the 1983 Cricket World Cup, and they were telling me I was infringing on an unrelated cricket match 40 years later. If you create content on this platform on YouTube, or if you're aware of that space, is this normal? Is this normal for people for videos to be delayed or to be infringed upon in some way because you've infringed on copyright content, but you actually haven't used that footage in your video, and YouTube is telling you no, you can't publish it. So for the first 48 hours of that video being up, I was the only one who could watch it. I did lodge a dispute claiming that not only was I not infringing on copyright material because I was adding commentary to it, the footage used was not of the copyright material it claimed to be. So if you haven't watched that video, please do. It has bombed more than I expected, and it was a pain to make. It's nearly 25 minutes, so if you are interested, again, the link is in the description on YouTube. And no, if you are watching this shortened version on Instagram, where I just uploaded this part of the rant, no, I'm not going to link to it. You can go to the other post, or you can get off Instagram and go over to YouTube. I'm not going to just take you there automatically. Do the work yourself. Anyway, rant over. Back to the main point of the video. This video is going to be split up into 3 parts. We are going to look at Test cricket, one-day cricket, T20 cricket. Let's start straight away with the Test matches. Test cricket is clearly, and is at least in my opinion, the pinnacle of cricket. It is aptly named. It is a test. But these days there aren't many tests. Most nations only have the money for 2 test series. It is a common refrain to say test cricket is dying. I think the better way to put it is a lot of cricket is dying. Test cricket, bilateral ODIs, T20Is, which I will talk about later. The only thing that really is flourishing is ICC tournaments and anything involving India, and also the Ashes. So I think the World Test Championship has been a step in the right direction, but it can't really succeed because while you're playing the same number of series, which is something we never had even before its introduction, you're not playing the same number of matches. So with the 19 tournament, my thinking was the fairest possible method would be for a home 2-test series, an away 2-test series, a home 3-test series, an away 3-test series, a home 4-test series, an away 4-test series, a home 5-test series, and an away 5-test series. If you've got 8 opposition teams in your league, you can play everyone once over the 2-year cycle. Now, automatically, this is a bit of a problem because that gets you to 28 matches, which is more than even England play at the moment, who play the most matches in the World Test Championship. So, if anything, I'm adding more cricket. But I will note, in my view anyway, the problem with cricket's current fixture is not the fact that it has too much cricket, though that is a problem. It has too much meaningless cricket. Why are we watching all this cricket? It needs to have some distinct purpose. So in my view, the best thing that can be done is make sure all this cricket is meaningful. All these test matches should be part of the World Test Championship. There should be no such thing as a non-World Test Championship test match, outside of maybe a one-off if you have enough time to fit that in. Now, this does leave out the 3 test playing nations that aren't part of the World Test Championship. Those countries, of course, are Afghanistan, Ireland, and Zimbabwe. Those nations should be participating in the Intercontinental Cup. This was a first-class international cricket tournament. These weren't test matches, but this was a good league. And you knew it was a good league because the best 2 teams throughout its history were Ireland and Afghanistan. And because of how good they were in that tournament, they got test status and full membership in the ICC. So I say bring it back. Make it a 7-team tournament, and in each summer of cricket, you would play 3 matches. 3 one-offs against 3 different test matches against 3 different nations. So in this structure, you'd be able to play 12 matches, and you'd play those teams away from home as well. So you'd play each team twice, the 6 opposition teams twice, once home, once away. This would, again, much like the World Test Championship, create a fair structure. You'd be able to play everyone at least once, and you'd be able to play everybody home and away, and everyone would play the same amount of matches, which is the biggest problem with the World Test Championship. I'm not sure who the next 4 nations would be that you would throw into this. Netherlands and Scotland would probably be the favourites from the associate nations, but countries like Nepal, the USA, Canada, Papua New Guinea, Namibia would all be potential options. There would also be promotion and relegation, so the bottom team from the World Test Championship would be relegated, and the Intercontinental Cup winner will advance and be promoted to the World Test Championship, because you shouldn't just get status just because a bunch of Englishmen in the 1940s decided this was a nice place of a empire to go on holiday, even though it was more the 30s, wasn't it? There was no cricket in the 40s because of the war, well, the first half of the 40s anyway. Now let's move on to one-day cricket. ODIs is the format that is in most struggle, I would think. Tests are still considered the pinnacle for the most part. T20s are the new hottest thing, and one-day cricket is just sort of there. The Cricket World Cup Super League was a step in the right direction, much like the World Test Championship, but it also had problems. Unlike the World Test Championship, you actually played the same number of matches. But just like the World Test Championship, they didn't actually play every team. The 13 teams in there, you only played 8 opposing teams in 3-match series. Because of the way the cricket fixture is structured at the moment, I think you can only do maximum 3 ODI series. They scrapped the Super League to replace it with the more biased, more corrupted, if you will, even though that's maybe a poor choice of words, ODI rankings. I say bring back that structure, the Super League, for Cricket World Cup qualifications. One-day internationals, bilateral one-day internationals, should be for qualification for the Cricket World Cup, the pinnacle tournament, at least for now, in the sport of cricket. Now, ideally you would want more teams in the Super League than there are in the Cricket World Cup. So with a 14-team Cricket World Cup that we're getting back in 2027, you would say, well, the host nation or the hosts would automatically be qualified, and you would suspect those teams to be in the Super League. So you would play, I would think, the best format would be for 2 3-match ODI series in your season of cricket. Summer of cricket would be in Australia, even though there are some parts of the world where the winter is the better place because the summer is the monsoon season. So you would play if you played 2 3-match ODI series over the 4 years, because it's a 4-year cycle, remember, for the World Cup, you could play 16 teams once, maybe at home, maybe away, during that World Cup cycle. Now, that is a long break to say Australia and England can only play 3 ODIs once in a 4-match series. So Australia, for example, would only host England in ODIs once every 8 years. I would like a better format. I'm not sure if we can really do that, because in my mind, 17 teams in the Super League would work best. 11 would advance the hosts, and then the rest of the top echelon, with 6 going through to the Cricket World Cup qualifier. League 2 and the Challenge League should have a very similar format. 9 teams, I think, don't play a tri-series in ODIs, though I will talk about that later for T20s. Play a similar format with 2 ODI 3-match series each season of cricket. Have that, particularly for those nations, that will be the pinnacle of their season of cricket, international cricket certainly. They would play those teams, the 8 opposing teams in each league twice, and the top 3 from the League 2 would go through automatically to the Cricket World Cup qualifier. The bottom 6 and the top 4 from the Challenge League would go to the Cricket World Cup qualifier playoff, where the top 3 from that tournament would make the last 3 of the 12 that would play in the Cricket World Cup qualifier. The top 3 from that go to the 14-team Cricket World Cup under the format that will be first used in 2027, with the 2 groups of 7 and the 1 group of 6, the Super 6 stage, which I think is the best possible format. It is very important that all these ODI series, much like T20s, there is no ODI series outside of this Cricket World Cup qualification process, because we need meaningful cricket here. There's too much meaningless cricket. We must have meaningful cricket. Let's finish off this part of the video with T20 cricket. Simon Dill was the first one I saw to make this particular argument. I'm certain he's not the only one, but I am sure he is the best to explain it.
I am a big believer that T20 cricket should never be played at the international level. It should only be played at World Cups. We should have a T20 World Cup every 2 years. No issue with that at all. I think it'll be a great event, magnificent event. But every other opportunity to watch 2020 cricket will only be at the franchise level. And therefore you are driving your T20 fan to watch domestic cricket or local cricket. You watch the Big Bash, you watch the IPL, you watch whatever we have back in New Zealand. You know, it's been called 5 different things in the last 7 years. You watch the Ram Slam, you watch all those things, because that's how you get your 2020 fix. And then every 2 years there's a T20 World Cup. If you want to watch India play, if you want to watch New Zealand play in a short format game, you can only watch them play 50 over cricket. So you drive people back to that game, and then your test matches, I just think they'll take care of themselves.
And I really like this idea. No T20s played at the international level outside of World Cups. Now, I'm going to throw a little caveat in there that I'm sure Simon would probably agree with. That's for the big nations. If you are one of the 35 teams in this Cricket World Cup qualification format that I previously explained, I don't think you should be playing T20s at the international level. I think those should be reserved ideally in tri-series or quad series for some of the lower nations, the associate nations that don't even have ODI status. That at the present moment have played like 10 international games tops, most of which against neighbouring teams. Speaking of the T20 World Cup, it's going to be a biannual tournament for the next few years. With the Olympics coming along, it will be interesting to see whether we agree that it's good to have the T20 World Cup and the Olympics in the same year. That's something that will need to be tested, and by post the 2032 Olympics, we will probably have an answer to that. Now, so that is something that's still very much in the air. Whether we even think a biannual T20 World Cup is a good idea. So we'll have to wait and see on that front. I'm not much of a soccer fan, but I do enjoy the FIFA World Cup qualification process. It's very interesting to see how all the different confederations make their formats and how those teams can then qualify for the FIFA World Cup. It's very interesting in 2026, given they're expanding to 48 teams. I would suggest that, much like I said earlier, you don't deserve to be given status just because a bunch of white blokes from England decided that was a nice place for a holiday and a couple of test matches. You should have to qualify through your region. We have the cricket equivalent to FIFA confederations. You have to qualify through your tournament. Now, this video is going to be long enough as it is, so I'm not going to explain this in great detail, even though I will put stuff up on the screen for you to pause and read if you really want to. But my proposal is for it to be basically staged in 3 groups, and this would be held over the course of the non-World Cup playing year. You will have, in the first round, groups of 4, with the top 2 advancing. Then there would be a second round with groups of 6, and then in the final round there would be another group of 6 with the top 3 from the East Asia Pacific, even though I personally prefer just to call it the Pacific Cricket Council. I think that should be the name. Also, by the way, ICC East Asia Pacific, ICC Americas, can they come up with a better name? So 3 from Pacific, 3 from Americas, 3 from Africa, and 5 from Europe, 5 from Asia. That leaves 1 host. Now, that format that I'm going to put up on the screen, that is all really under the assumption that the host nation isn't part of your qualification process, as the host will need to go through the regional qualifier. So it needs some tweaking for that, undoubtedly, and a few trial runs. But that should be the T20s at the international level for countries like Australia, England, India, all those test-playing nations, even smaller nations like Namibia and the USA. They're only T20s. They should be played at World Cup and World Cup qualification tournaments, and also the Olympics as well. Now, I will admit, what I've explained so far is very men's cricket dominated. The women's game is in an interesting spot, even especially among Test cricket. There's a want to play more women's Test matches, but again, there doesn't seem to be too much desire from administrators or room in the calendar. Ideally, you would want men's and women's cricket to have a sort of similar, if not the exact same, structure across Tests, one days, and T20s. But that is going to be even more long process. This is already unlikely for men's cricket. For women's cricket, this will take even longer to do. So, how would you format all of this? Well, in my mind, if you're one of those smaller nations, you should be playing one or two home, tri or quad series, and also should be going to other nations every now and then. For nations with one ODI status, which will be the 35 teams in the Cricket World Cup qualification that I previously explained, they should be playing 2 3-match ODI series. That would be their international season. For teams in the Intercontinental Cup, you'll have 3 test matches in addition to those 6 ODIs, and then for the nations in the World Test Championship, 7 tests with 6 ODIs. Remember, no T20s. You should also, if I'm going to use an Australian example because that's the best way my brain's going to explain this. So I would think, if I was formatting it from an Australian perspective, those 6 ODIs should be at the start, maybe late October, early to mid-November. Test matches should start mid-November and carry on their way through to that Sydney Test match. And then the Big Bash would carry you through to about Australia Day, which would be the conclusion of the cricketing summer from a men's perspective. The women's would be involved in there as well with the WBBL women's ODIs and women's test matches as well, probably being played alongside the men's BBL. So I feel like that is roughly a good guide. ODIs to start, test cricket, and then the T20 franchise league. If you're a T20 fan and you want to watch Australia or England or India or New Zealand play a white ball series, for the most part, it is going to have to be a 50-over format game. So we drive people back to that game. And if you want to watch more cricket, here, there's some test matches. They've worked out pretty well for over a century and a half. Almost now. Actually, the 150th anniversary test match will be in 2027. I will be the first one to admit this is extremely unlikely to happen very quickly. It's going to have to take a lot of will from administrators and a lot of will from the cricketing public to get something even close to this happening. But if I was in charge, this is what I'd be aiming for. It's going to have to be a multi-stage process. You will want to reintroduce the Intercontinental Cup, reintroduce Super Leagues, and stop nations playing bilateral T20s, the big nations that is. You would want to set up the formats, and you'd want to, over multiple World Test Championship cycles, bring those nations, the gap between the nations that play the least and the nations that play the most, down until eventually every nation plays the same number of test matches over that 2-year cycle. This is all going to be a very difficult task if we want to see this or anything or similar of that actually going on. But what I hope I produce is at least a blueprint, something similar, something that, at the very least, everyone is playing the same number of test matches and ODIs over a particular cycle, and everybody is going to play meaningful cricket. That's the most important thing here. All these matches need to be meaningful. The test matches, you're trying to get to the World Test Championship final, prevented from relegation, or move your way up through the Intercontinental Cup. In those ODIs, you're trying to qualify for the biggest tournament we have, the Cricket World Cup. And for those T20s, you're developing through for those really small nations. And for the other nations, you are playing for a spot in the T20 World Cup. And obviously, we know about the importance of ICC tournaments. That goes without saying. The most important thing that I will say here is just remember, there is no bad format of cricket. It is a brilliant sport. I love watching any format. They've all got their own little quirks, little exciting things that make them very interesting to watch. But it will take a lot of work from the cricketing public. Remember the European Super League of soccer? That didn't go anywhere because the soccer public, the football fan, if I have to use their vernacular, said, no. Atletico Madrid, Juventus, Barcelona, Liverpool, all those others. No, you are not just going to let yourself never be relegated. Just give yourself status because you're the richest teams. I feel like the cricketing public, it's more beyond time, and maybe we'll get our own Super League saga one day, that we have to say, no, Australia, England, India, you've hogged too much of the money, you've given yourself too much of the status, we need to grow the game. Cricket has diminished very much so in the last decade and a half, largely because of that SCG 2008 test match. Please make sure to go watch that, please, I beg of you, I need to see that get more views, and plenty of likes as well. So, all in all, just remember, the formats of cricket, Test, ODIs and T20s, are all really diminishing, largely because of Indian greed, but it is important to remember those formats of cricket, especially Tests and ODIs, they will die. Only if you let them.